people, right? So I think the short answer is AI is going to disrupt this field as well. Just little tongue in cheek, because it looks like AI is going to disrupt a lot of areas. So it's just a matter of time before maybe, users don't need to enter time manually anymore. But what that looks like, when it's going to come, how it's going to happen, it's anybody's guess.
And for my part, I agree. I know that there's a lot to be said, of course, for AI and that automated time tracking. But sometimes, at least in our situation, as you probably saw, sort of suggesting, when you touch an issue or something pops up on your calendar, rather than being more prescriptive, where we're saying you worked this time on this issue. We could say, did you work on this issue, and let the human actually say, hey, this is what I actually did. So it's more of a helper than tracking that, being more automated. We've seen a lot of situations where when you have that automated or AI time tracking, it's inexact in the current state. So rather than getting like good granular data for where what you did, what you logged time on, you get kind of blobs of time where you don't necessarily know exactly what was done. And that's where we find that sometimes that human element is great for really truly capturing what's been done, as opposed to just kind of letting a machine do it for you. There are certainly key use cases for AI in that, but I know a lot of folks, especially when they're trying to make sure that that data is right, that's when you get into something like timesheets.
Awesome. Thank you for that answer, Robbie and Girish.
Mhm.
Girish, organizations often struggle with measuring productivity meaningfully. What are the advantages of integrating the time tracking data that Robbie just showed us with HR metrics, and what are some common pitfalls?
Absolutely. I think one of the things that you mentioned earlier as well, Caroline, that timesheets, it's something that a lot of us dislike. I think tools like Tempo make it easy, which is what we are thankful for. But Prabhu and I have been consultants, billable consultants, for a long time. And you know what happens on Fridays? You get all these emails from management saying enter your timesheets, and we put in our reminders. And if you don't enter timesheets, you get dinged on your bonus. We've been in organizations where it's been for good reason, because to your question, a lot of organizations rely on timesheets to determine even billing revenue. So a lot of impacts on those hard business metrics as well. So primarily, like Robbie mentioned earlier, how does an organization distinguish between CapEx and OpEx? High level reporting based on what exactly the organization is working on, those kind of metrics. It's a bottoms up approach where timesheets becomes that feeding mechanism to quickly and very often accurately determine where the spend is going. A lot of organizations, uh, the people are their biggest expense, and being able to track time, and especially again in these times, you hear about organizations asking people to send a weekly email about 5 things you have done last week. So timesheets uh, avoids all of those additional manual emails and metrics. So it's a great way to get a good account of where the employees are spending time. Are there areas that they could potentially look at investing more, or maybe even reducing the investment?
Yeah. So, tracking hours um, worked doesn't necessarily equate to tracking value delivered. How do you help organizations move beyond just measuring effort and start tracking meaningful business outcomes?
True. Well, that's true that, just hours by default doesn't necessarily mean it's productive or efficient. Probably a lot of organizations have different ways of doing it, but my belief is timesheets at least gives that visibility into where people are spending time. That way, organizations can then make a more informed decision as to what is more efficient, what is productive, what is strategic to their organization, and make that determination of which projects to continue.
Awesome. Girish, could you show us a brief demo of how your solution integrates Tempo timesheets with HR platforms like Workday?
You would love to. Let me share my screen. I think.
You have to click allow. Yeah.
Okay, got it. That's a new one. So, um, so here's our application on link, which allows us to integrate Tempo to Workday. And OnLink, has been in the application in the Atlassian marketplace for more than a year. It allows connectivity between Jira and a bunch of other systems, HR systems, identity management systems, Tempo, etc. And this particular integration that we have developed allows organizations to export Tempo Worklogs into a time tracking system such as Workday, a financial system such as SAP, or even another time tracking system. Believe it or not, several organizations have multiple time tracking systems, maybe because of mergers and acquisition, or it could be that they use a system for their employees, but for contingent workforce, they may use another system. We've run into Chronos, which is UKG, as another time tracking. And our application can help integrate Tempo Worklogs with these other systems to consolidate timesheets, reduce duplicate entries, and so on. So those are the advantages of leveraging our app. So the first thing, we set up connections in the application. So for example, Tempo, which has a well-documented API. It allows API authentication either using an API key or OAuth. We support both. And here I've used mock endpoints. And you set it up, you give the URL as well as the API key. In a similar way, you can also set up connection to Workday. I have a test Workday connection here. And again, Workday has its API where you need a API version, tenant name, and username password. So you set all of that up. And once you have the connection set up, now you'll be able to define what we call a bulk job. Before going to bulk job, let me quickly walk through assets. The reason why asset configuration is useful is, earlier Robbie was showing in his demo how when a user enters a time work log within Tempo, they can select an additional account or they can select additional fields that are very specific to their organization. Now, when you are sending time to Workday from Tempo, there may be additional fields, for example, cost center or a business unit, legal entity, all of these fields that are already available at the employee level, but you don't want to keep asking the employee when they enter time. So these additional attributes, we support storing it in JSM assets as a lookup. And when we pull the timesheets from Tempo, we can augment that information automatically with this assets information at the timesheet or a worker level and push that final work log to Workday, because Workday expects those additional fields, like I said, legal entity or a cost center, etc. So that reduces the burden on complicating the user form where users enter time, and we automate all of that behind the scenes. So we have assets configuration here. We pull in data from Workday or other systems, and it's a simple mapping exercise. We set it up, and this is the information that can then be aggregated with Tempo before pushing it to Workday. For the specific Tempo to Workday integration, we have what is called a bulk job. Essentially, this is a scheduled kind of a batch mechanism that users can set up to run every hour, every week, every day, whatever their preference is. And they give it a name, they select source. Here I've selected Tempo. Users can use this drop-down list to add a few configuration items. Tempo supports configurations like teams or periods. So you can either do all in order to get the timesheets for all the teams, or you can specify specific teams. Maybe you're testing, or maybe you are limiting this integration for a few different teams. You can specify that as well. Periods, which is time periods within Tempo. Again, Tempo has a definition of specific periods throughout the year, depending on the organization preference, whether it's weekly or monthly. And you can set it up to something like a previous week, because you want to be able to always look back and pull all the relevant timesheets for that particular period. So you can set that up like this, or previous month, and we have a few different configurations as well. You can also have a couple of filters. So for example, one of the common filters is obviously you want to pull only approved timesheets. So once timesheets are approved in Tempo, we can pull it, do the mapping, and then push to Workday. We also have additional filters. So for example, here, where activity defined in Tempo is either development or design. Maybe the account filter that you saw earlier in the form. Other filters that can be applied on, this is all on Tempo data. It's optional. If you want to pull everything, you just leave the filter out. Otherwise, you can set up a specific filter. AQL is how we pull data from that assets, the one that I was talking earlier around how you can pull additional attributes and augment Tempo data. You can then come here, select your target. You can specify a batch limit. Let's say you have hundreds or even thousands of timesheets that are being entered every week in Tempo. You can set it up to process 250 at a time. This is something that goes on in a loop, so that we avoid any timeout issues, and then we are able to process thousands of timesheets at a time.
Very cool.
Yep. And then finally, this is what the endpoint for Workday looks like. It's a specific API endpoint, and we provide smart values. So for example, Workday expects the employee ID, which may be different from what Tempo has or what Jira has. So we automatically again map the Atlassian Jira user to Workday employee ID, put that in here. Project reference, cost center, again coming from assets for that specific worker or a timesheet. Any other organization units like business unit can be mapped. And then finally, the specific time entry, which is what was the date and the time spent in hours. So this is how we set up the configuration. And once the configuration is set up, users can run it manually, or as you saw earlier, there's a scheduled job component as well that keeps running every day and pushes the newly approved timesheet data to Workday. That's a quick overview of how this particular integration works.